So today, it is our joy indeed to welcome 2 new members into our beloved Beacon community. And when I call your names, Candy in the shades, please come to the front here. Sequoia Hill. And Kieran Madison.
These initiates for Beacon membership have completed the Path to Beacon training, which involves learning about the heritage of Unitarian Universalism and its principles, the requirements for becoming a member, and the opportunities for service and support of Beacon. Today we welcome into our community these new members who have chosen to make a commitment to this congregation by formally signing the Beacon membership book. The chalice pins you receive are a token of membership as we officially welcome you into our congregation. The pin is a symbol of your commitment to UU and Beacon, and of our shared commitment to you today.
New members, we are so glad to have you here with us and that you have chosen this community of fellow seekers to travel with you on your life journeys. So will you accept our gifts of fellowship, discovery, and service? If you do, say, I will. Will you offer us your unique presence and gifts? Say, I will. Will you add your name to the long history of Unitarian Universalist women and men and others who spread hope with our living faith? And will you engage with us as we seek to create a community and a world dedicated to love and justice? Thank you. And now for the congregation. Congregation, please respond, we will, to these questions. Will you welcome these new members with the warmth and comfort of your fellowship?
We will.
Will you seek to add your strengths and talents to the new gifts they bring to us?
We will.
Will you share our triumphs and our struggles as our community grows and changes?
We will.
We welcome you in covenant of this Beacon Unitarian Universalist congregation in the promise that we make each week to ourselves and to each other, which holds our community together with common purpose and common love in the midst of our beautiful diversity of belief in accordance with the principles and values of Unitarian Universalism.
And now we'd like to applaud our new members.
And now let's sing our children's benediction and send the children on their way to class. Let us now enter into our time of reflection and meditation. And we begin, as we always do, by sharing what has been included in our book of joys and concerns. As is always the case, there are concerns and joys that follow one another, and I will read them as they are submitted rather than bundling them in good things and bad things. They all happen one after the other. The first one is shared by Paula, who says, "A good friend passed on last week, Cheryl Wilson. Please keep her family in your thoughts." Then there is one that is shared without a name attached to it, but it says, "I am so happy to see our Beacon family grow in love. Welcome new friends and welcome to new members." Here is a sad piece of news shared by somebody who did not put their name down. It says, "My friend's house burned down and she lost all 5 of her pets." Sad indeed. And another piece of sad news, also without name attached. "I light a candle in celebration of the life of my friend Alice Gilroy, who passed away 2 days ago at age 101. And Greg Schindler shares, "I believe we are all joyful to welcome the new members today." And I would like to add one more entry. Virginia Ganeski, one of our members, sends love to the Beacon community. Her husband is improving every day. And let us now observe a few moments of silence to bear witness to the joyousness that goes from I to you and from you to we. Let us multiply kindness that way. Let us breathe in a few more breaths. And out. And in. Some time ago, quite a few articles were published about a fascinating experiment, and you may have read about it. The Washington Post published an article, I think it was in 1993, October actually, on what happened in this particular experiment. Here's what happened. A group of people, actually a large group, people who were experienced in meditation, gathered in Washington, D.C. Eventually, 4,000 people participated in this. What did they do? They meditated. They used the kind of meditation that is called transcendental meditation, which is similar really to what we practice for a few minutes during our Sunday service. It's a variant of that. It focuses more on calming the mind and being present than some versions of meditation, but it's really meditation. Like in our meditation practices, the people participating in this experiment were practicing to transcend the petty worries of having likes and dislikes, of making distinctions, of making judgments, and all those things that bog us down and make us not think about others, but about ourselves. Now, this experiment had a purpose that went beyond the individuals practicing. The idea, this is quite bold, the idea was to find out if just meditation conducted by a really large group over a period that was 2 months would have a significant effect on the crime rate in Washington, D.C. Yes, I said it was a bold experiment. But believe it or not, the crime rate actually declined by up to 23%. That's a quarter during the time of the experiment. And after it was concluded, the crime rate went back to what it had been before. So you can imagine why a lot of papers were published about this experiment and about the results. And some of those were done by physicists who investigated what was happening in relation to what is called unified field theory. And if you know physics, you probably know what that means. So lots of interesting technical papers have been published. And you can easily find some of them on Google. If you just Google 4,000 people meditating Washington, D.C., you'll find more than you care to read. But you know, one may wonder if this study was really carefully designed. You know, you might have some doubts. But there are some good aspects to it. The experiment was pre-approved by the police department. I'm beginning to already be a little suspicious about how that was really a clean-cut determination. But anyway, it was pre-approved. It was pre-approved by the local government and by many other groups. And there was a 27-person review board that was established to monitor the progress of what was going on. And the people on this review board included criminologists, sociologists, local government leaders, psychologists, civic leaders, many others. This overall finding of a statistically significant reduction in the crime rate was called the Maharishi effect, because the type of meditation that was practiced, the transcendental meditation, was named after the spiritual leader of this particular type of meditation. So if you Google that, Maharishi effect, you will also find a lot of articles. Now, the conclusions suggest that if a certain percentage of the population, and they figured out 1% would be sufficient. If 1% of the population in a city engages in transcendental meditation, then crime rates will go down by an average of 16%. It wasn't the same every day. You know, the average was 16%. And that does sound pretty good, doesn't it? You look skeptical. This is a tough audience. So one might ask, why don't cities employ such large groups of meditators in their locations in order to consistently have lower crime rates? Apparently they haven't done that since that experiment. And other people would say, indeed, not so fast. yeah, there might be some problems with experiments like this. One of them being that the police was apprised of the fact that this experiment was taking place. Maybe they wanted to affect the results. Who knows? I mean, that's just one thing. But if the results are indeed robust, then that suggests some fascinating things. It could mean that our minds are all connected. So that this experiment is actually a demonstration of our interdependence, physically and mentally. It could even mean that when a small percent of the population practices meditation, this can lead to positive changes in our society. This is a good time to think about solutions like that.
Yeah.
It could even mean that our minds can predict the future. Some people say, I can do it, but this is more evidence that that might be possible. And it certainly suggests that the peacefulness and the kindness of some people's minds makes others kinder as well. So kindness spreads. It multiplies in a way. Yeah, that's very optimistic, very hopeful. But, we must also be cautious to just accept those kinds of results. You could ask, how long did they meditate? Did they sit there all day, every day? What did they do during the night? What did they eat? There's all kinds of things. Were they always the same participants who were practicing during those 2 months? Was it summer? Was it winter? And when we begin to ask such questions, problems do indeed emerge in this experiment and the way it was set up. All participants were experienced meditators in one particular transcendental meditation technique. And of course, the person heading that type of meditative practice would say, and this is the way you should do it. I beg to differ. But one can certainly ask, would other techniques of meditation have the same results, like loving kindness meditation? That makes sense. One could say probably, but we don't know that for certain. It takes a while to organize a 4,000-person experiment. Yeah, and there's another problem. Another reason for caution lies in the fact that the number of people meditating started off at 600, and then it ended up at 4,000. So is that really a clean, unbiased experiment? Also, it suggests, if there were indeed 4,000 people eventually, that a lot of mental effort or meditative mental activity was involved. Imagine if you were a city and you had a city council debating whether they should engage a group to do this in their city. It seems that 1% of the population is what you're looking for. And imagine hiring people to do this. Well, then you would have to pay them, right? You would have to pay the participants a wage to do this kind of work. Would it still lead to the same results? And if the meditators would want to keep their job, if it pays well, would they kind of try to influence what's going on in the city? There's just all kinds of little questions that come up. And you can imagine city planners passing a budget that has a large group of meditators. I don't think so. But still, it's difficult to just dismiss the whole experiment as silliness. And that's why even physicists are engaged in unified field theory discussions of it. Some of those papers are quite fascinating. I remember one time participating in a large group meditation, also in Washington, D.C. And this was during the years when the Chinese government's persecution of Falun Gong practitioners had come to light. And in fact, a lot was published about how brutal they were in their persecution. I cannot even begin to tell you what they did in this room. But again, if you want to Google that, you can find all that information. So I was in Washington, D.C. for a conference. It was January. It was not warm. But, I went by the Chinese embassy. And I saw a large group of meditators in the park that was in front of the Chinese embassy. In front of the building. They were very quiet. I was so impressed with the quiet dignity of the group that I felt I have to join them. And I did. Mind you, the first week of January, the ground was moist and icy, but we were all there in our meditative poses for a very long time. And I admit, I gave up after a while when I could just no longer take the cold on my knees and the rest of my body. I thought, that's enough of that. But others continued. And I did feel at the time the peacefulness that emanated from the minds of the meditators to the surrounding areas. Everybody who passed by there was affected by it. I doubt, from the news that I read in the following years, that the Chinese government decision makers were affected by it. The persecution of Falun Gong members continued, and horrible human rights violations have come to light. So if that activity in front of the embassy affected the minds of other people, it was maybe not the effect that the people sitting in meditation were hoping to achieve. Maybe it was a more indirect effect on other parts of the population in Washington, D.C. And I've also had some interesting personal experiences related to the minds of meditators affecting other people's minds without directly interacting with them. And that happens every time when I drive home from a week-long meditation session. I haven't done that for a while, but every time I did, I felt and I acted calmer and kinder. And it seemed that for a while, the other drivers on the road that were surrounding me, they also seemed kinder. It seemed indeed that kindness was multiplying. However, if you have a critical mind, you might think it's also possible that I was driving less aggressively than usual, and therefore other drivers seemed kinder. And once I had driven about 250 miles, I didn't have such feelings at all anymore. So if there was an effect, it was rather short-lived. So it seems like meditators would have to keep doing things like that practice I was describing in Washington, D.C. Now, to me, it seems plausible and promising overall that what happens in the minds of some people who practice meditation can indeed affect the minds of others. So that loving kindness indeed can spread like those ripples in a body of water that we sometimes imagine during our loving kindness meditation practice, where we think of ourselves as a pebble that falls in the water and the ripples spread and ripples of other people's pebbles spread, and we have this back and forth movement in the water. That's a movement of kindness. Maybe kindness multiplied because of all this back and forth. And for a Unitarian Universalist, this would then also imply that if we live our basic UU values and we do so with mindfulness, that these values, which are all centered on love and kindness and compassion, could possibly spread and multiply. So we have kindness multiplied as a possibility. It's a hopeful prospect, especially in our times of government policy making that is more harsh rather than it is kind. So wouldn't it be nice? And may it indeed be so. Let's breathe calmly for a few more moments. And let us now rise in body or spirit to sing hymn number 1031, that is in the Teal hymnal 1031, and its title